From Keene in the Shire, the Liberty Media capital of the world, this is Daryl W. Perry, host of FPP Radio News for Friday, December 9th, 2016. Silver is trading at $17.05 per ounce. Gold is valued at $1,167 per ounce. Bitcoin is trading at 1 cent, and the average price of Bitcoin is $777. Antiwar.com reports following a vote in the U.S. House of Representatives, the U.S. Senate voted 92-7 on Thursday to pass the 2017 National Defense Authorization Act, the main military spending bill for the next year. This is a compromise version of the bill, which only includes funding for the wars for the early part of 2017, with the assumption that an emergency bill will be passed in early 2017 to pay for the rest of it. This allows Congress to falsely claim that they're only increasing military spending by a few $billion over last year, when in practice the total of all of the bills will be a much bigger increase. As with most recent NDAAs, it forbids the closure of the detention center at Guantanamo Bay and also bans the Pentagon from closing military bases it no longer wants. The compromise bill took out two key provisions which would have threatened the veto-proof majority it has, one aiming to require women to register for the draft, and another, the Russell Amendment, which would have allowed military contractors to discriminate against people on the basis of gender or sexual orientation. Surviving the final cut was a $160 million outlay to the U.S. State Department to identify and counter Russian propaganda. This program started with an eye towards bolstering independent, read pro-U.S., journalists in Eastern Europe, but has since centered around false Washington Post allegations that a large chunk of America's own independent media, including Antiwar.com, are secretly in league with Russia. The bill now goes to the president for a signature, and while the White House has not taken a formal position, there appears to be no real question that he'll ultimately sign it rather than be overridden for a second time in his final year in office. For nearly 40 years, Roberts & Roberts Brokerage has been a trusted source for buying and selling precious metals like gold and silver. They also take Bitcoin for precious metal purchases and have permanently removed the minimum purchase amount for all orders paid in the digital currency. Call Roberts & Roberts today for knowledgeable advice on buying and selling precious metals and a forward-thinking approach to new technologies. 800-874-9760 or visit online at rrbi.co. UPI reports Ronald Burt Smith, the man an Alabama jury recommended be sentenced to life in prison 22 years ago for the fatal shooting of a store clerk, was scheduled to be executed on Thursday until the U.S. Supreme Court said it needed more time to review the case. The court issued a temporary stay for Smith on Thursday night. Alabama is the only state in the United States in which a jury can decide to execute someone with a split vote. Alabama law also allows a judge to override the jury's recommendation. Smith's jury recommended he spend the rest of his life in prison with a vote of 7-5, but the trial judge overrode the recommendation and sentenced him to death. In January, the U.S. Supreme Court struck down a law in Florida that allowed judges, not juries, to designate death sentences for defendants in murder cases, citing a 2002 Supreme Court ruling that stated jurors have final say in death sentence cases tried by a jury. Alabama's judges are elected officials, and the Equal Justice Initiative argues judicial overrides increase during election years, suggesting some death sentences could be imposed not because of the facts related to the case, but because judges seek to display themselves as tough on crime during their re-election campaigns. In 2115 New England, there are no borders, no states, and no regulations, yet never has a more peaceful and prosperous place existed. But Mr. Drake's security company has seen better days. Faced with the prospect of waning power, Mr. Drake intends to replace the anarchy of New England with a government. But at what cost? And can anyone stop him? Anarchy in New England by Joe Jarvis is available from Amazon.com and all major bookstores. Reuters reports weather forecasters are sending chills down some spines with a prediction that much of the northern half of the United States could see frigid weather next week, similar to a life-threatening lows the polar vortex brought to parts of the country in 2014. The southward shift in the polar vortex in 2014 brought the Midwest some of its coldest weather in 2 decades. Icy conditions snarled travel, and thousands of flights were canceled or delayed. The coldest weather next week is expected in the Midwest and Northeast starting around Tuesday, according to forecasts that show temperatures in the single digits in some cities. It is unclear how far south the cold air will be felt. This has been FPP Radio News, online at fppradio.com.